Hello there, students. I hope you're doing well and welcome to another edition of our video lectures here. We're going to go to a really hot topic, a sensitive topic, something that families struggle with, and that, of course, is divorce. I know we've been talking about that a lot, but this is one of those hot topics in the class that we're going to devote a lot of space to, if you would. All right, so let's go to our slides here and begin our lecture. What we're going to look at is just some different reasons why we have such a high divorce rate in our country, and then looking at some predictors of divorce. All right, so let's get into it here. Okay, so with divorce, once again, it seems to be one of those really common things that exists in our society. I'm sure most of you know someone who's gone through a divorce. Maybe you've even gone through a divorce yourself, depending on your scenario and your life, your experiences and so forth. It seems like it's all around us. And so we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this, as we said before. And so what I want to open up with here is some different reasons why our country has such a high divorce rate. So what are some reasons why we have this huge sort of rate of divorce and so forth? Well, there's several reasons. Let's kind of take a look at those. Number one, the liberalization of divorce laws. This is due to something called the no-fault divorce law, which ironically started here in California in 1970, where it's sort of surrounding things like gender neutrality, equal division of property and alimony and that kind of stuff. So in other words, it's made divorce a lot more of a fair situation for people once they go through it. Because obviously in the past, it was not always practiced that way, where one person would really benefit from the dissolving of the marriage and the division of the resources and so forth. So this one has made it a lot more fair for people, where things are divided down the middle, so to speak, and it's made it a lot more doable in that sense. So that has to do with the no-fault divorce law, which started in 1970. You could also argue that one of the reasons we have such a high divorce rate is society's acceptance of it. See, guys, back in history, divorces were almost scandalous and unheard of. And, everyone would be talking about someone who went through a divorce, like it was this sort of rare, shocking event that we couldn't even imagine happening to someone. Now, it seems like it's all around us. There's some statistics that are saying, the older statistic we always use was half of first marriages end in divorce, and then the rate goes even higher for second and third marriages. So nearly half of marriages end in divorce. So the point is because it's so frequent and it's happening so often, it must seem somewhat normal to people to go through that, or even to expect potentially to go through that once they do become married. So we really think that society has become numb to the effects of divorce just because it's all around us and it seems like it happens all the time. You could also argue that there's a lot of glamour around remaining single and having a single life and doing the dating scene and things like that. So I think sometimes our society really honors that lifestyle, which is a great thing, obviously, to play the field and be free and that kind of thing. So certainly it's okay to get married and get divorced and then sort of live this lifestyle is kind of what I'm saying. So once again, just to kind of wrap that up, divorce seems to be a lot more accepted than it was in the past. And so because it's accepted, it seems that people would be possibly more willing to go through a divorce. Reduction in divorce costs. So apparently it's a lot cheaper to go through a divorce. I don't know personally, I've never been through that. I've never experienced that. But because of the laws that we mentioned early on, the no-fault divorce laws, it's made it a lot more doable for people, where they won't be completely financially ruined after a divorce, for example. So a lot of that has to do with the equal division of property and those cutting the costs compared to what it was in the past. All right, this last point is more of a sociocultural component. So some people argue that one of the reasons we have a high divorce rate is because of the increase in education and work experience of women. Do you guys understand what that's sort of saying? In other words, traditionally back in history, men were the breadwinners, where wives were more domesticated and raised the children and so forth. So after a divorce, it may have financially ruined women because they were in this sort of position where they weren't, necessarily in a career, for example, or earning money. Now, because women are very much involved in the education realm and career, which is a great thing, which is obviously rightfully should be that way. We're finding that a lot of women are financially independent and are understanding that even if this marriage goes sour, south or whatever, I'm still going to be completely fine because I have this career, I have this experience, and therefore I can handle it and do it on my own. So obviously there's a lot of single parents out there that are making ends meet because of their experience and their education and so forth. So we think that because of that fact, because women are a lot more liberal and involved in the workplace and so forth, like I said, rightfully so, it may have sort of made open the doors, for divorce to potentially happen because they're understanding that I can survive after divorce in the aftermath of what a divorce actually is, that kind of thing. All right, so a lot of those reasons are kind of, factoring into possibly why our country has such a high divorce rate and why it's sort of spread in other countries as well. All right, so now we're going to look at some common predictors of divorce. These are commonly cited reasons why someone went through a divorce and some factors related to that. And a lot of them are really, kind of obvious and expected, but let's kind of go through these. Now, keep in mind, divorce usually takes place between the 5th and 10th year of marriage, if we look at what the studies are showing. So in other words, maybe not necessarily in the beginning, I mean, it certainly can, and maybe not down the road, which it certainly can as well. But if we look at the averages, it's kind of like 5 to 10 years or so, what the studies are showing. But however, these are the commonly reported reasons why a divorce actually happened. Number one, infidelity, which you would sort of expect. So if you discover that your spouse is cheating on you and is not being faithful, obviously that brings up strong emotions and problems and betrayal issues. So no surprises there. Spending money foolishly. Can you see why this would kind of rub someone the wrong way? If you had this spouse that was sort of squandering your earnings on gambling or whatever it is, so that's often a commonly reported reason why people divorce, and you can understand why that would create tension, especially if the couple is struggling to make ends meet financially. You can understand why that would create problems. Drinking and drug use, is often associated with divorce and cited as reasons. You have to understand that certainly marriages can survive with these things going on, especially if both partners are doing it together and it's not creating any problems. However, I think it's pretty common sense to understand that drinking and drug use often come with destructive behaviors which create tension in a relationship. So I think, maybe it's not the drinking or drug use per se, it could be, but certainly a lot of the things that go with that lifestyle could create tension and problems, adding fuel to the fire, so to speak, in terms of a marriage having issues. So we know that that one is often linked to things that are related to couples breaking up. Engaging in irritating habits. Okay, so you never really know someone until you move in with them and start living with them, and sometimes it gets to the point where this other person is doing something so much that it's getting on your nerves and you can't handle it with the different habits and so forth. So a lot of people report those kind of things, that they just had enough, they can't deal with it anymore, that the ways of this person are just too much to handle and too much to take, and therefore it creates tension. Getting married at a younger age is associated with a higher likelihood of getting divorce, okay? There's a couple different things you have to kind of look at with this one. First of all, I think that's really misleading. If you get married young, let's say you get married at 20, which is considered obviously to be young based on what we've talked about. The point is that there's more time over the course of the lifespan for that divorce to actually happen. Does that make sense, guys? So if you get married at 20 and you live till you're 100, then that's 80 years where a divorce has a potential of happening, compared to say if you got married at 60 and now you have 40 years left if we look at that same time frame. So to me, that's kind of misleading. It's more time for the divorce to actually happen, so you have to kind of think about that. But they have found a connection between younger couples and divorce. You could also argue, from a psychological perspective, is that things that are related to divorce, such as jealousy, infidelity, which we've already mentioned, are probably more likely to occur when you're younger. Those things seem to matter a little bit more when you're young and the opportunities are out there. For example, compared to someone like my age, where it's like you don't even care anymore. You're just sort of older. You're not having as many opportunities for extramarital relationships, or maybe you're not as attractive theoretically as you were before. Those kind of things. You could also argue the stability could grow, the solidarity, the couple could grow over time, or you're just more mature about it. So it would explain why these things kind of factor in more for younger couples, if you would. So that one to me is kind of misleading. Having parents who were divorced. So we often see this trend that people who went through a divorce as a child are more than likely to get a divorce themselves when they do get married down the road, okay? Maybe this going through the experience of a divorce with your own parents reduces the quality of commitment and therefore makes it less stable in that sense. For example, if you look at your childhood, wow, I went through a divorce, my own parents divorced, it may not seem like a big deal if you got divorced yourself because you've been through it and you survived it, you're okay. I mean, obviously it depends, because obviously it could create some really strong emotional scars where it could create problems. But we've seen that pattern where people who get divorced often have this sort of background of divorce in their experiences. Okay, gender, which is kind of an interesting one to kind of include here. But what we're saying is we're going to compare men and women with this one. In terms of who actually initiates the divorce, we are finding that it is women who are twice as likely to get the ball rolling in terms of getting a divorce, okay? So women are more likely, 2 times more likely to actually initiate a divorce compared to men. I thought that was interesting. Addition of children has been factored into divorce, especially the first child, as it turns out. So once again, children not necessarily are linked to getting a divorce, but obviously our parents out there know raising children is one of the toughest jobs there is. It can be stressful, it's draining, it's time consuming. And so if the couple is already having problems in their relationship, and now we're adding on the responsibility and the strains and stress of having children on top of that, it may be adding fuel to the fire, which is creating tension. So sometimes children kind of play into that, unfortunately. Now you also have to look at it that sometimes people stay married for children, like they don't want their kids to go through it, so they stay married until they're middle-aged or whatever, and then the divorce happens after that. In fact, we see a cluster of divorces in middle age because of that. But the studies are also showing that sometimes the factoring in of children may create tension and kind of change things. Okay, so once again, that may create problems. Once again, especially before the marriage too, it also seems to be important there. Low education levels. So we know that divorce is more common in folks who are not as educated. Okay, so it's more likely to happen in that sort of scenario. There's probably several reasons for that. I mean, I don't want to sit here and speculate on that, but it could be that they're not educated on the ramifications of divorce. There's a whole host of reasons. Maybe it's more stress because they're living in poverty. There's a lot of moving parts to factor in there. But if we look at the averages, the overall sort of trend there, low education individuals are more likely to get divorced than higher educated. We talked about that, and that's covered, of course, in the textbook and in other lectures. All right. So as you can see, many things lead to divorce. By the way, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but these are often some of our most commonly reported, cited reasons why people decide to end their marriage. All right, so I hope this has educated you and helped you understand a little bit more about marriage and divorce and so forth. It's been a real pleasure working with you guys all semester here, and please move on to the next step in the course, and we will see you online.